know and have experienced, the UX of Web3 has been really, really bad so far. For several reasons. One of the first one is that the securities relies on a user securing a single secret at all costs. We know the infamous seed phrase. That makes it a very bad user experience. We also know that on Web3, as a user, you cannot make a mistake. If you go to a wrong website, you connect to a wrong website, you make a typo, you are at risk of losing all your funds. And again, this is very, very scary. And finally, everything is way too complex. When you interact with a protocol, say a DeFi protocol, you typically need to make multiple transactions to get something executed. If you go to Uniswap, you first need to approve your token. That's one transaction. Then when your tokens are approved, then you can start swapping. And that's just for a very basic, fundamental DeFi block. If you start playing with very complex DeFi primitives, sometimes you're requiring to make 5 to 10 transactions. So that's a very, very bad user experience. And because that user experience is bad, this has led to a lot of problems. I mean, if you look on crypto Twitter, we'll see every day users complaining about losing their assets, losing their private key, connecting to a phishing websites. So all that complexity is leading to error, is leading to users being scared, and as a result, users are turning to centralized solutions. I mean, we are all in this ecosystem for decentralization, self-custody, but if we take a step back, the majority of people that have crypto assets are actually using Coinbase, Binance, they're using FTX, so we are losing that battle. MetaMask and Ledger are very, very small compared to these centralized exchanges. So this terrible Web3 user experience is basically pushing users away from Web3. So why are actually centralized solutions much better? Well, I think one of the main reasons is that centralized solutions, they offer Web2-like user experience. And that's very familiar to users, that's reassuring for users. And what's a typical Web2 UX? Well, first of all, on Web2, you have a very easy onboarding. If you want to go to use Coinbase, you're not required to install a wallet, an application. No, you can simply go to the website, connect with email and password. That's something that's very simple. You don't need to think about transaction fees. When you do an operation on Web3, everything will be bundled within the business model. So all this is it's very easy to onboard users. Something that Web2 does also very well is actually helping you recover your assets. If you interact with a Web2 financial product, typically if you lose your password, nobody's scared. We have all lost passwords. You simply click on recover password flow, and you gain back access. You identify yourself to the Web2 provider, and you get back access. Typically on a Web2 financial product, you will have risk detection and 2FA, right? If you make a simple operation, it will go automatically. If you try to say transfer or operate or make an action with a large value, your Web2 platform will ask you to confirm your identity and challenge you with a second factor. And finally, on Web2, typically operations are very simple. They are all one click. If you want on Coinbase to stake your funds, you don't need to approve token. No, you simply do the action. Everything is one click. So that leads to a question. Can we actually reproduce that familiar Web2-like experience in Web3? And by that I mean with Web3 is with these fundamental properties of decentralization and self-custody. And of course, the answer is yes. And the solution to that is something called account abstraction. For those who know me, I've been talking about account abstraction for a while, so this is not going to be one of those talks. But I just want to remind you what account abstraction is. Account abstraction is the possibility to program the functionalities of your account, right? The UX of Web2 or Web3's and EOA is very complex because the Ethereum account is coupled to the private key, the signer. With account abstraction, your account becomes a smart contract, and you can put logic into that smart contract. That means you can start building flows that users understand and really improve the user experience of Web3. So to give you a mental model with account abstraction, you will typically, again, use a wallet or a client, but when you make a transaction, that transaction is sent to your account contract, and that account contract will execute the custom logic that you have defined, and finally execute the operation on chain. Okay, so I mentioned that one of the things that was really good with Web2 was easy onboarding. So can we get easy onboarding with Web3? And of course, the answer is yes. So this is a product that we've announced at StarkWare session called a web wallet. So this is on-chain, right? You go to a website, you connect, you put email, verify your email, you put a password, and that's it. You have an account. Okay, so that took literally 5 seconds to onboard the new users to blockchain. And with that account, you can, for example, on Starknet, you can play with Brick. But what's really cool is that you can keep your session. So you can now go to another dApp, say Jedi Swap, and you'll still be connected. So again, these are all features that we've been used to on Web3. Actually, we can do them on Web2, sorry. Actually, we can do them on Web3. Okay? And so this product, the Argent web wallet that we are launching on Starknet, you see the onboarding. Nowhere it was mentioned seed phrase. Nowhere it was required the user to write 24 words on a piece of paper. And something that's very interesting as well is that leveraging account abstraction, we can do sponsor transaction. So you can actually use this product web wallet without having to pay transaction fees, or maybe paying transaction fees in a stable coin. Because why should you have ETH when you're only interested to play a non-chain game which requires you to have a stable coin? And so the trick again is leveraging account abstraction. With account abstraction, you can use something called a paymaster. So this is what I illustrate here. When you want to make an action with the web wallet, you'll send your transaction, and in your transaction, you're actually telling your account, you know what, don't pay for that transaction. Paymaster that is provided by the dApp will sponsor the transaction. So again, using account abstraction, we can build an onboarding that is as good, 100% on par with a Web2-like onboarding, but without losing self-custody. Okay, another feature that is really convenient with Web2 is the concept of recovery, right? I mentioned that on Web2 you typically have a recover your passwords flow. So can we get the same in Web3? Again, the answer is yes, and that's something that's called social recovery. So a forgot your password flow on a normal Web2 dApp, what it is basically you losing the object that you need to authenticate to the website, and so you just contact the Web2 provider and say, hey, I've lost my key, I've lost my password, but you know what, I'll prove you that I am myself using an email, phone, a second factor, and the Web2 provider will basically reset your password. Well, social recovery is exactly the same, except that you choose who's acting as the Web2 platform. So instead of relying on a centralized provider, it can be yourself with a hardware wallet, it can be a friend, or it can be a service that you trust, or a combination of all three. And so again, how does that work with account abstraction? Well, if I come back to the picture with my account contract, instead of having just one key that can make transfer, I can now add a second key to that account. And that second key cannot transfer token, it cannot use my assets, but if for some reason I lose the client, for example on Argent Mobile, if I use my phone, I will lose the key that was on my phone. In that case, the recovery service or the guardian can help you get back access. How? As a user, you simply reinstall the application, you call the service and you say, hey, I have a new key, can you reset my account? And the recovery service will make the only transaction is authorized to do, which is basically disabling the old key and setting a new key on your account. And again, that's something that's 100% non-custodial. You can literally choose who's your guardian. So in that example, I showed a recovery service that the user chooses, but of course you can use a hardware wallet, you can use another user's. It's fully under your control. A third part of the Web2 experience, financial Web2 experience that's really good is fraud monitoring or 2FA. Okay, can we get the same on-chain? Well, again, yes. This is again something that we are launching on Argent X, the main wallet on Starknet. Here, what this demo is doing is showing a normal Argent X account that can transfer funds, right? But that is protected by an Argent Shield. And we are simulating a hacker having access to the seed phrase, taking that seed phrase to a new device, so reinstalling Argent X on a new computer, pasting the seed phrase. With a normal traditional wallet, you would be doomed. All your funds would be lost. But thanks to this fraud monitoring and 2FA, Argent Shield, the hacker will not be able to use the account. Why? Because he needs to authenticate to the service and verify the 2FA challenge, which he can do. Okay. So how does it work? Again, because I have my account contract that I can program, I can add a second key. And this time, that second key, I give it to a service that I call a fraud monitor, right? And every time, every time I make a transaction, the account will only validate the transaction if it is signed by both keys. So when I interact with a known DApp, my client, my wallet, will basically take the payload, the transaction, give it to the fraud monitor and say, hey, can you just confirm that this is safe? If it's safe, give me a signature. If it's not, the fraud monitor will request a second factor. So here I'm interacting with a known DApp, the fraud monitoring service, which can use a lot of information. It can look on chain, it can look into your history, will detect this is a safe operation, I can do the transaction. If no, I browse internet and I go to a DApp that I've never interacted with, the fraud monitor, when receiving that payload, will say, hey, this is an unknown DApp. Maybe this is safe, maybe this is not. I'll just make sure that you are indeed you and you control the wallet, and it will ask you to confirm your identity with that second factor, in that case, email. So in the demo that I showed, it's kind of an on-off. For the moment, the fraud detector only detects if you are using a new device, but we are working on really making that risk-based. So really based on the transaction, the payload that you're about to execute, the fraud monitor will ask you a second factor or not. And finally, another very cool feature of web2 is that everything is one click. Is that simplicity of executing action in one click on a web page. Well, again, with account abstraction, you can have something called multi-calls. Instead of your transaction executing one operation, it can actually execute a sequence of operations. So if you interact with a DApp, in one transaction, you can, for example, approve an ERC20, call a first DApp, or call a second DApp. So what does that mean in terms of UX? Well, if you look there, I compare the typical experience on Ethereum, where to make a swap, you need to approve your token, wait for it to be mined, and then confirm your swap. On Starknet, everything is one click, right? The transaction that I make will actually approve the exact amount of token that is required, and will execute the swap. But you can actually go much further. And for those that have used Aspect or MeanSquare, which are NFT marketplace on Starknet, you would have noticed that they've introduced the concept of a shopping cart. Again, this is a typical Web2-like experience. If I go on Amazon, I can actually select a lot of items that I want to purchase and only check out at the end of my session. When, thanks to multi-call, you can do exactly that. You can select the NFTs that you want to acquire, and at the end of the session, one click, one transaction, and all the NFTs will be in your wallet. So in conclusion, I hope I managed to convince you that we can actually build a user experience on Web3, which is on par, or if not better, than what we have in Web2, without losing these fundamental properties of decentralization and self-custody. And all this is possible thanks to account abstraction. And with this, I thank you.